30 feet below Cu Chi District, northwest of Saigon. 11 soldiers from the 1st Infantry Division's 242nd Chemical Detachment crawl into a tunnel mouth no wider than a manhole, armed with flashlights, 45 pistols, and the knowledge that 7 miles of Viet Cong passages lie ahead. Passages that could collapse, flood, or detonate at any moment. Above ground, an entire battalion is pinned by sniper fire and mortar rounds originating from spider holes that vanish as soon as they open. What starts as a desperate probe into the dark becomes the template for underground warfare. Industrial firepower cannot reach what it cannot see. But 11 men with steady nerves can map an entire shadow fortress and turn it into a tactical advantage. The Cu Chi District sat 25 miles northwest of Saigon, a patchwork of rice paddies, rubber plantations, and red clay soil that had been contested since the French Indochina War. By early 1967, the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, had established Fire Support Base, FSB Pershing, in the heart of what intelligence called the Iron Triangle, a Viet Cong stronghold honeycombed with tunnels. Aerial reconnaissance showed villages, tree lines, and irrigation ditches. It did not show the 150 miles of underground passages that had been dug by hand over 2 decades, some reaching depths of 40 feet, complete with hospitals, command posts, and armories. The tunnels were narrow by design. Most measured 2 feet wide and 3 feet high, forcing anyone inside to crawl on hands and knees or belly. Trapdoors were camouflaged with woven grass mats and dirt. Ventilation shafts were disguised as termite mounds. The Viet Cong had engineered right-angle turns every 15 to 20 feet to contain blast waves from grenades and to prevent line-of-sight shooting. Chambers branched off the main corridors, some stocked with rice and ammunition, others rigged with punji stakes, scorpions in clay pots, or pressure-detonated explosives. American doctrine in 1967 relied on firepower and mobility. Artillery batteries could drop 105 millimeters and 155 millimeters rounds at rates exceeding 4 rounds per minute per gun. B-52 arc light strikes delivered 30 tons of ordnance per sortie, cratering entire grid squares. But high explosive could not reliably collapse tunnels dug below the water table, and saturation bombing left the tunnel network largely intact. Infantry sweeps above ground met sniper fire from spider holes that opened, fired, and closed in seconds. The enemy was invisible, and the ground itself had become a weapon. On January 12, 1967, elements of the 1st Battalion, 28th Infantry, Black Lions, pushed into a village cluster 2 miles east of FSB Pershing. The lead company reported light contact at 9:30 a.m. Single shots, no muzzle flashes, casualties from unseen firing positions. By 10:15 a.m., mortar rounds began landing in the company perimeter, 60 millimeters and 82 millimeters tubes, firing from positions that shifted every few minutes. Forward observers called in counter-battery fire, but the mortars went silent before the first 105 millimeters rounds impacted. 15 minutes later, the mortars resumed from a different azimuth. The battalion commander requested air support. A forward air controller, FAC, in an O-1 Bird Dog orbited at 1,500 feet, marking suspected firing positions with white phosphorus rockets. F-100 Super Sabres rolled in with 500-pound bombs and 20 millimeters cannon fire, shredding tree lines and cratering paddies. The strikes were accurate. They were also irrelevant. The mortar teams had already withdrawn underground, and the tunnel entrances remained hidden beneath vegetation and false floors in village hooches. By noon, the battalion had taken 12 casualties without confirming a single enemy kill. The company commander reported that his men were shooting at ghosts. Intelligence officers reviewed maps and prisoner interrogations, piecing together a picture of a tunnel complex that extended beneath the entire operational area. The question was no longer whether tunnels existed, but how to fight an enemy who could appear, attack, and vanish into the earth. faster than artillery could respond. The 242nd Chemical Detachment had been formed in late 1966 as an ad hoc solution to the tunnel problem. Its official mission was to employ CS gas and smoke grenades to flush out tunnel occupants, but the reality was more complex. Tunnels in Cu Chi were too deep and too well ventilated for gas to be effective beyond the first few chambers. What the detachment needed were soldiers willing to go inside, map the passages, identify threats, and mark routes for engineers to exploit or destroy. The men who volunteered were small in stature, most under 5 feet 8 inches, and weighing less than 140 pounds, because the tunnels would not accommodate anyone larger. They carried minimal equipment: a .45 caliber pistol, a flashlight, a knife, a length of communication wire, and a compass. No grenades, because the blast in a confined space would kill the thrower. No rifles, because there was no room to aim. The work required patience, nerve, and a tolerance for darkness so complete that the flashlight beams seemed to be swallowed by the earth itself. On January 13th, a patrol from the Black Lions discovered a tunnel entrance beneath a false floor in an abandoned hooch. The entrance was 18 inches square, reinforced with bamboo, and angled downward at 30 degrees. A smoke grenade dropped inside produced no visible exhaust, suggesting the tunnel had multiple ventilation shafts. The Battalion S2 requested a tunnel team. 11 men from the 242nd arrived by Huey at 2 p.m., carrying their gear in canvas bags and wearing no body armor. The team leader, a staff sergeant from Ohio, briefed his men in 3 sentences. We go in, we map it, we mark threats. No heroics. If it collapses, we dig each other out. The first man entered the tunnel at 2:30 p.m., trailing a spool of wire connected to a field telephone above ground. The tunnel descended 15 feet, leveled off, then turned sharply to the right. The walls were hard-packed clay, cool and damp, with wooden support beams every 6 feet. The air smelled of earth and old smoke. The flashlight revealed footprints in the dust, fresh enough to suggest recent use, and a scatter of rice grains near a side chamber. The team moved in single file, each man maintaining contact with the man ahead by touch. The lead man probed the floor and walls with a knife, checking for tripwires and pressure plates. Every 20 feet, he paused to mark the wall with chalk and report his position via the wire. The tunnel branched twice in the first 100 feet, each branch angling in a different direction. The team marked the branches and continued along the main passage, which descended another 10 feet and turned left. At 3:15 p.m., the lead man found the first booby trap, a grenade suspended in a bamboo tube, its pin attached to a tripwire stretched across the tunnel at ankle height. He marked the wire with a strip of cloth, reported the find, and carefully stepped over it. The tunnel widened into a chamber roughly 6 feet square, with a ventilation shaft in the ceiling and a stack of wooden crates against one wall. The crates contained AK-47 ammunition, 7.62 x 39 mm rounds in stripper clips, and several dozen Chicom stick grenades. The team leader photographed the cache with a Polaroid camera, marked the chamber on his map, and moved on. By 5 p.m., the team had mapped half a mile of tunnel, identifying 3 weapons caches, 2 booby traps, and a junction where 5 passages converged. The junction chamber was larger than the others, with a wooden table, a kerosene lamp, and a map of the district pinned to the wall. The map showed American fire bases, patrol routes, and supply convoys, annotated in Vietnamese. The team leader photographed the map and radioed for an intelligence officer to meet him at the entrance. The tunnels were not random. They formed a network, with main corridors running east-west and north-south, connected by smaller passages that allowed rapid movement between firing positions and supply points. Some passages led to spider holes that opened onto the surface, camouflaged with grass mats, and positioned to provide enfilade fire on American patrol routes. Others led to underground hospitals, complete with surgical tables and medical supplies. The Viet Cong had built an entire infrastructure beneath the ground, invisible to aerial reconnaissance and immune to all but the most precisely placed explosives. The team marked each junction and chamber with chalk and cloth strips, creating a map that could guide engineers and infantry through the complex. At 6:30 p.m., after 4 hours underground, the team emerged at a different tunnel entrance, 800 feet from where they had started. They had cleared 1 mile of tunnel, identified 8 weapons caches, disarmed 4 booby traps, and mapped a network that extended in every direction. The Battalion S2 estimated that the full complex covered at least 7 miles, possibly more. The question was whether 11 men could clear it all before the Viet Cong collapsed the tunnels or counterattacked. The tunnel network posed a problem that firepower alone could not solve. A single 500-pound bomb could crater the surface and collapse a short section of tunnel, but the network was too extensive and too deep for saturation bombing to be effective. Engineers could pump CS gas or acetylene into the tunnels and ignite it, creating a fuel-air explosion that would consume oxygen and collapse chambers, but the method was indiscriminate and risked destroying intelligence materials before they could be recovered. The alternative was methodical clearance. Map the tunnels, mark the threats, recover documents and weapons, then destroy the network section by section with satchel charges placed at key junctions. The process was slow, dangerous, and required soldiers willing to spend hours in darkness, breathing stale air, and probing for traps that could kill them instantly. The 242nd's tunnel rats were the only unit capable of the work, and their success depended on nerve, patience, and an intimate knowledge of Viet Cong engineering. On the evening of January 13th, the team leader briefed the battalion commander on what they had found. The tunnel complex was not a hiding place. It was a base of operations. The Viet Cong could move beneath the ground, faster than American infantry could move above it, emerging to attack and withdrawing before artillery could respond. The only way to neutralize the threat was to go inside, map the network, and deny the enemy the use of the tunnels. The battalion commander authorized the team to continue, with engineer support and a rifle platoon on standby above ground. The mission would resume at first light. January 14th began with a pre-dawn artillery barrage, 105mm rounds impacting tree lines and suspected mortar positions at a rate of 6 rounds per minute per gun. The barrage was intended to suppress enemy activity and cover the movement of the tunnel team, but it also served as a signal that American forces were active in the area. By 6 a.m., the team had re-entered the tunnel at the same point they had exited the previous evening, trailing fresh communication wire and carrying additional marking supplies. The tunnels were cooler in the morning, and condensation dripped from the ceiling in places. The team moved faster now, familiar with the layout and confident in their ability to spot traps. They cleared another mile by 9 a.m., marking 6 more weapons caches and 3 additional booby traps. One trap was particularly sophisticated, a pressure plate connected to a crossbow mounted in a side chamber aimed at chest height. The team leader disarmed it by cutting the bowstring, then photographed the mechanism for intelligence analysis. At 10:30 a.m., the lead man reported hearing voices ahead, faint and echoing through the tunnels. The team halted, extinguished their flashlights, and waited in silence. The voices grew louder, then faded. The team resumed movement, following the sound to a junction where 3 passages met. One passage led upward to a spider hole. Another descended to a lower level. The third continued straight, widening into a chamber where the voices had originated. The chamber was empty when the team arrived, but a kerosene lamp was still warm, and a pot of rice sat on a clay stove. The Viet Cong had been there minutes earlier. The team faced a choice: pursue the enemy deeper into the tunnels, or continue mapping and marking. The team leader chose the latter. The mission was not to engage the enemy underground, where the Viet Cong had every advantage, but to map the network and deny them the ability to use it. Pursuit would risk ambush in a confined space, where a single grenade or a collapsed ceiling could kill the entire team. The team marked the chamber and moved on, following the main passage as it descended another 15 feet and turned south. The tunnel here was older, with wooden support beams that had begun to rot and walls that showed signs of erosion. Water seeped through cracks in the clay, pooling on the floor and making the footing treacherous. The team moved slowly, testing each step and probing the walls for hidden chambers. At 11:45 a.m., the tunnel opened into the largest chamber yet, a room roughly 12 feet square, with a ceiling high enough to stand in. The chamber contained a wooden desk, a stack of documents, a radio set, and a map table covered with overlays showing American positions and patrol routes. The documents included orders, supply manifests, and casualty reports, all written in Vietnamese. The team leader gathered everything into a canvas bag and radioed for an intelligence officer to meet him at the nearest exit. The intelligence hall was significant. The documents revealed that the tunnel complex was not just a local Viet Cong base, but a regional headquarters coordinating operations across 3 districts. The radio set was a Chinese-made HF transceiver capable of reaching Hanoi, and the maps showed planned ambush sites and supply routes along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The information would allow American forces to anticipate enemy movements and interdict supply lines, but only if the tunnel network could be fully mapped and the enemy denied the ability to relocate. The team continued clearing tunnels through the afternoon, emerging at 4 p.m. after mapping another 2 miles. They had now cleared 4 miles of tunnel in 2 days, identifying 23 weapons caches, 11 booby traps, and 2 command posts. The Battalion S2 estimated that 3 miles remained, concentrated in the northern section of the complex where the tunnels ran beneath a rubber plantation. The northern tunnels were the deepest and most heavily fortified. Intelligence reports suggested they contained a hospital, an armory, and possibly a prisoner holding area. The team would need engineer support to breach reinforced doors and additional time to clear chambers that might be defended. The battalion commander authorized a 3rd day of operations, with a rifle company positioned above ground to provide security and respond to any enemy counterattack. On the morning of January 15th, the team entered the northern tunnels through an entrance discovered by engineers using ground-penetrating radar. The entrance was concealed beneath a false floor in a rubber plantation storage shed, and the tunnel descended at a steep angle, dropping 35 feet in the first 100 feet of passage. The walls here were reinforced with concrete, and the air was noticeably cooler, suggesting the tunnels were deep enough to reach the water table. At 8:30 a.m., the team reached a steel door set into a concrete frame, secured with a padlock and hinges that showed signs of recent use. The team leader radioed for engineers, who arrived with cutting torches and breaching charges. The door was cut open at 9:15 a.m., revealing a chamber 20 feet long and 10 feet wide, lined with wooden shelves and surgical tables. The chamber was a fully functional underground hospital, complete with medical supplies, surgical instruments, and a generator for lighting. The hospital contained evidence of recent use: blood-stained bandages, empty plasma bottles, and a logbook recording the treatment of wounded Viet Cong soldiers. The logbook listed dates, injuries, and outcomes, providing a detailed picture of enemy casualties over the previous 3 months. The team photographed everything, collected the logbook and medical records, and marked the chamber for demolition. Adjacent to the hospital was an armory, a chamber 15 feet square, stacked floor to ceiling with weapons and ammunition. The inventory included AK-47 rifles, RPG-7 launchers, 82mm mortar tubes, and crates of Chinese-made explosives. The team estimated the cache contained enough firepower to equip a battalion-sized force for sustained operations. Engineers placed satchel charges at the chamber's support beams, timed to detonate after the team had withdrawn. The hospital and armory demonstrated the scale and sophistication of the tunnel network. The Viet Cong had built an underground city, capable of supporting large-scale operations indefinitely. The only way to neutralize the threat was to map every passage, recover every document, and systematically destroy the infrastructure that made the tunnels viable. The tunnel rats had proven that the work could be done, but it required patience, nerve, and a willingness to crawl through darkness for hours at a time. By noon on January 15th, the team had cleared 6 of the 7 miles estimated by intelligence. The final mile lay beneath the northern edge of the rubber plantation, where the tunnels were rumored to connect to a river exit that allowed the Viet Cong to resupply by boat. The team entered the final section at 1 p.m., following a passage that descended to 40 feet below the surface and turned east toward the river. The tunnel here was the narrowest yet, forcing the team to crawl on their bellies and push their gear ahead of them. The walls were wet, and the air was thick with the smell of mud and decay. At 2 p.m., the lead man reported hearing water ahead, a steady dripping that grew louder as the team advanced. The tunnel opened into a chamber where a stream flowed through a channel cut into the floor, fed by an underground spring and draining toward the river. The chamber was a supply depot, with wooden crates stacked on platforms above the waterline. The crates contained rice, dried fish, medical supplies, and ammunition, all wrapped in waterproof tarps. The team marked the depot and continued following the stream, which led to a tunnel exit at the river's edge, concealed behind a curtain of vines and bamboo. The exit was large enough to accommodate sampans, allowing the Viet Cong to move supplies into the tunnel network without being observed from the air. The discovery of the river exit explained how the Viet Cong had sustained operations despite American air superiority and artillery dominance. Supplies moved by boat at night, unloaded at the river exit, and distributed through the tunnel network to caches and command posts throughout the district. The system was invisible to aerial reconnaissance and immune to interdiction, except by ground forces willing to enter the tunnels and map the routes. The team leader radioed the Battalion S2 with the coordinates of the river exit and recommended that engineers demolish the entrance and collapse the tunnel leading to it. The S2 concurred and ordered a rifle platoon to secure the riverbank while engineers prepared demolition charges. At 4 p.m., the team withdrew from the tunnels, emerging at the rubber plantation entrance after 3 days underground. They had cleared 7 miles of tunnel, identified 31 weapons caches, disarmed 15 booby traps, recovered intelligence documents that would shape operations for months, and mapped a network that had allowed the Viet Cong to dominate the district. The information they provided enabled the battalion to plan targeted operations, interdict supply routes, and deny the enemy the use of the tunnels. What had started as a desperate probe into the dark had become a tactical victory. On January 16th, engineers began systematic demolition of the Cu Chi tunnel network. Satchel charges were placed at key junctions, timed to detonate in sequence and collapse entire sections of tunnel. The demolitions began at 8 a.m., with charges detonating every 15 minutes. The ground shook with each blast, and plumes of dust rose from ventilation shafts and spider holes across the district. The demolitions were not intended to destroy every foot of tunnel. That would have required weeks of work and thousands of pounds of explosives. Instead, the engineers focused on collapsing the main corridors and sealing the entrances, making the network unusable for large-scale operations. Smaller passages and side chambers were left intact but marked on maps for future reference. By noon, the engineers had collapsed 3 miles of tunnel and sealed 8 entrances. The remaining tunnels were too deep or too dispersed to demolish efficiently, but the intelligence gathered by the tunnel rats allowed the battalion to monitor the exits and interdict any attempt by the Viet Cong to reoccupy the network. The enemy had lost their underground fortress, and with it, their ability to attack and withdraw with impunity. The immediate tactical impact was measurable. In the week following the tunnel clearance, the battalion reported a 70% reduction in sniper incidents and an 80% reduction in mortar attacks. Patrols that had previously drawn fire from invisible positions now moved through the district without contact. The Viet Cong had not been destroyed, but they had been forced above ground, where American firepower and mobility gave the 1st Infantry Division a decisive advantage. The intelligence recovered from the tunnels proved equally valuable. Documents identified Viet Cong commanders, supply routes, and planned operations across 3 districts. Radio intercepts confirmed that the loss of the Cu Chi tunnels had disrupted enemy logistics and forced a reorganization of command structures. The maps and overlays recovered from the command post allowed American forces to anticipate enemy movements and position blocking forces along likely withdrawal routes. The success of the tunnel rats demonstrated that unconventional problems required unconventional solutions. Industrial firepower, artillery, airstrikes, and saturation bombing could dominate the surface, but it could not reach an enemy who lived and fought underground. The only effective counter was soldiers willing to enter the tunnels, map the network, and deny the enemy the use of the infrastructure they had built over 2 decades. The battalion that had been pinned by sniper fire and mortar attacks on January 12th was able to resume offensive operations by January 20th. The company that had taken 12 casualties without confirming a kill now moved through the district with confidence, knowing that the tunnels had been mapped and the enemy forced into the open. The battalion commander credited the tunnel rats with saving his unit from a protracted and costly fight in terrain that favored the defender. The 242nd Chemical Detachment's 11-man team became the model for tunnel operations throughout the Vietnam War. Other units formed their own tunnel rat teams, trained in the techniques developed at Cu Chi, probing for traps, marking passages, recovering intelligence, and calling in engineers when chambers were too large or too fortified to clear alone. The work remained dangerous. Tunnel rats suffered casualty rates higher than any other specialty, but it was effective, and it provided a tactical advantage that firepower alone could not achieve. The Cu Chi tunnels were never fully destroyed. Sections remained intact throughout the war, and some are preserved today as historical sites. But the clearance operation in January 1967 proved that the tunnels could be mapped, the enemy could be denied their use, and American forces could fight and win in an environment that seemed designed to negate every advantage they possessed. The operational lessons from Cu Chi shaped American tactics for the remainder of the war. Intelligence officers learned to prioritize tunnel mapping and to treat underground networks as critical infrastructure rather than isolated hiding places. Engineers developed new demolition techniques, including shaped charges designed to collapse tunnels without cratering the surface, and acetylene pumps that could flood passages with explosive gas and detonate it remotely. Infantry units learned to work with tunnel rats, providing security above ground while the teams worked below. Forward air controllers learned to mark tunnel entrances with smoke rockets, allowing fighter bombers to crater the surface and seal exits. Artillery batteries learned to fire time on target, 2TT missions, timed to coincide with tunnel demolitions, suppressing enemy forces that might attempt to interfere with engineer operations. The integration of tunnel clearance into combined arms operations demonstrated that Vietnam required a different approach to warfare. The enemy could not be defeated by firepower alone, because firepower could not reach an enemy who lived underground. Victory required soldiers willing to go where the enemy lived, map the terrain, and deny them the infrastructure that made their tactics viable. The psychological impact of tunnel clearance extended beyond the immediate tactical results. Viet Cong fighters who had relied on the tunnels for safety and mobility found themselves exposed and vulnerable. Interrogations of prisoners captured after the Cu Chi operation revealed that the loss of the tunnels had shaken morale and forced units to relocate to less secure areas. Some units fragmented, with fighters deserting or withdrawing to sanctuaries in Cambodia. American soldiers who had felt hunted by an invisible enemy now had a measure of control. Patrols that had moved cautiously expecting ambush from spider holes that could open and close in seconds, now moved with confidence, knowing that the tunnels had been mapped and the enemy forced into the open. The shift in morale was subtle but significant, and it contributed to the 1st Infantry Division's ability to dominate the Iron Triangle for the remainder of 1967. The tunnel rats themselves became legendary within the division. Their willingness to crawl into darkness, disarm traps, and map passages that could collapse at any moment earned them respect and a reputation for courage that bordered on recklessness. But the work was not reckless. It was methodical, patient, and grounded in a clear understanding of the threat and the techniques required to neutralize it. By the end of January 1967, the 242nd Chemical Detachment had trained additional tunnel teams and expanded operations to other districts in the Iron Triangle. The techniques developed at Cu Chi, probing for traps, marking passages, recovering intelligence, and calling in engineers for demolition, became standard procedure for tunnel operations throughout 3 Corps. The success of the program led to the formation of dedicated tunnel rat platoons in other divisions, each trained in the methods that had proven effective at Cu Chi. The expansion of tunnel operations did not eliminate the Viet Cong's use of tunnels, but it forced them to adapt. Tunnels became smaller, more dispersed, and less connected, reducing their utility for large-scale operations. The enemy continued to use spider holes and short passages for ambushes, but the extensive networks that had allowed them to dominate entire districts were no longer viable. The tunnel rats had not won the war, but they had denied the enemy a critical advantage. The legacy of the Cu Chi tunnel clearance extended beyond Vietnam. The techniques developed by the tunnel rats influenced urban warfare doctrine, particularly the emphasis on methodical clearance, intelligence recovery, and the integration of specialized teams into combined arms operations. The lessons learned in the tunnels of Cu Chi informed operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other conflicts where the enemy used underground infrastructure to negate conventional military advantages. The final demolition at Cu Chi took place on January 28, 1967, when engineers collapsed the river exit and sealed the main supply route. The blast sent a geyser of mud and water 50 feet into the air, and the tunnel leading from the river to the plantation collapsed along its entire length. The Viet Cong attempted to reopen the exit twice in the following weeks, but both efforts were detected and interdicted by patrols guided by maps created by the tunnel rats. The battalion that had been saved by the tunnel clearance continued operations in the Iron Triangle through the spring of 1967, encountering sporadic resistance but never again facing the coordinated attacks that had pinned them in January. The company that had taken 12 casualties on January 12th completed its tour with no further losses from tunnel-based ambushes. The battalion commander's after-action report credited the tunnel rats with turning a potential disaster into a tactical success. The 11 men who had crawled into the Cu Chi tunnels on January 13th completed their tour in Vietnam and returned to the United States. Some remained in the Army, others left the service and returned to civilian life. None spoke much about the work they had done, but their contribution was recognized in unit citations and in the operational reports that shaped American tactics for the remainder of the war. The Cu Chi Tunnel Network remains one of the most extensive and sophisticated examples of underground warfare in modern history. The clearance operation in January 1967 demonstrated that even the most formidable defensive infrastructure could be neutralized by soldiers willing to enter the enemy's domain, map the terrain, and deny them the use of the ground itself. The tunnel rats proved that courage, patience, and methodical technique could achieve what firepower alone could not. The operation saved a battalion from a protracted and costly fight in terrain that favored the defender. It recovered intelligence that shaped operations across 3 districts. It demonstrated that unconventional problems required unconventional solutions, and it established techniques that would be used throughout the Vietnam War and beyond. The 11 men who cleared 7 miles of tunnel in 3 days did not win the war, but they won a battle that mattered, and they did it one crawl, one trap, one marked passage at a time. Stories like this remind us that war isn't just about dates and numbers. It's about people, the split-second decisions that shaped entire battles. Every flight, every firefight, every tactic is a piece of a massive puzzle where one order could decide the fate of hundreds. We bring back these forgotten moments to show that behind every report and archive page stood real men, pilots, scouts, engineers, soldiers, whose courage and ingenuity changed the course of war, even if their names were never written in textbooks. Tell us in the comments, what moment of the Vietnam War impressed you the most? Or what operation should we cover next? Your ideas keep these stories alive. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. It helps us uncover more forgotten chapters where history lives through those who fought it.